Hello and welcome to Martini's Eco and Country Bites. Today is a small micro bite of a breakdown and an overview of some of the changes that we've had quite rapidly in the last week or so in the green renewables, as well as what's going on with the way that people are seeing and perceiving this greenwashing agenda. So this week, it was announced that Blue Float Energy is looking at abandoning or pulling up stumps on their project in Victoria. It's a $20 billion project. Small change, right? Could you imagine what we could do with $20 billion in this nation with homelessness and people that are struggling every day to just put food on the table and keep a roof above their heads? We're giving away to foreign corporations. So this was a Spanish giant that's pulled up stumps or going to be pulling up stumps in our green renewables project, which is welcomed by so many because it's getting to the point now that people are starting to add up that we would be putting ourselves into generational debt. Very relieved that over the last 12 months, the relentless information sharing and those that are in the media that are wanting to try and share the truth, uh, as little as it may be, has been having a massive impact. Certainly, mainstream media is not the source of truth and real information. I want to take us back just a minute to our esteemed and very knowledgeable Minister Blackhat Bowen. Um, his interview with Chris O'Keefe back in at 2GB. Thank you, 2GB, who have been there to share the truth, the stories of locals that do not consent and do not want these projects in our communities. It's now starting to really permeate through not just the East Coast, but all through Western Australia as well, where mainstream media have completely ignored everything to do with the offshore and green renewables garbage here. In this interview, Chris asked Mr. Bowen, will the federal government have subsidies to these companies and to come out here and actually do these offshore wind turbine projects? To which Blackout Bowen said, no, we're not. We're not going to be subsidising these projects. So Chris said there will be not any federal government subsidies from Australian taxpayers' dollars to build these wind turbines. To which Blackout Bowen has replied with a firm, no, the firms are coming out here and doing this all on their own back, at their own cost, and they don't need federal subsidies at all. No. So with the failing green renewables that we're seeing with pulling up stumps left, right, and centre, how could it be that we would not foresee that these projects were never economically viable, logistically a nightmare on our roads in Australia, where there is such a large area to be navigated, unlike other small European nations, or in this case, there's many ports that they have utilised in European nations to do this. We have such a different imprint as far as our geology and the way that we have to circumnavigate these issues that were never, ever addressed or thought out. We've seen that wind turbine blades have dislodged and come off during traffic. And that's just one. We have plans for thousands upon thousands of these to go across our land and destroy our communities and interrupt our lives yet again, even though we didn't want them. So again, I come back to Mr. Bowen. You've made this statement that no, we're not subsidising, but we know that this is fundamentally a lie. Please give us the truth about the breakdown here, because every time you've asked for these numbers, we have never had a straight answer. So it's not logistically viable, and it's certainly not environmentally viable. In every single group that is pushing back against these offshore wind turbines, as well as on land, onshore, There are major issues to do with farmland, encroachment onto areas of national significance. Oh, there's a word. That Kosciuszko National Park itself can be devastated now, and it's okay because we use the premise that climate hysteria will justify destroying habitat and massive biodiversity loss. So we move on from this devastation and look at the fact that the government has not done its due diligence in any way, shape, or form. It did not consult with community members, which of many contain local experts. As we know, the one place that you go to straight away in a community are the local experts and local knowledge. So all of these areas in Australia are united against offshore wind, and Save Our Beloved Geograph Bay is one of those. So now we can see there is a united front completely pushing back against the offshore wind industry. We have asked time and time again for the justification of this, the fact that the EPBC has not done its due diligence in some of its findings, especially saying that the Bunbury offshore project is not a controlled action, when we know it must be a controlled action because of the number of endangered species that exist in there, and the fact that there has always been a precedence set from Queensland onshore wind projects where we have seen that they have had to go out and put in place a 2-year investigation into that. So we come now to the fact that we now have oil and gas giants, the Norwegian Equinor, who have pulled out of its project. It's the third project it's removed itself from in the Australian offshore wind industry runnings. So the latest has been the Bass Strait offshore project. And of course, the Bass Strait, wow, between that and what's going on in Victoria, if anyone hasn't done their research and looked at just the imprint that this is going to have on our natural systems and marine environment, it's absolutely disgraceful that at any point this could have gone ahead or even be suggested. There's 12 projects in the Victoria Gippsland project. And in Bass Strait, obviously Equinor were one of the major players in this. They have just pulled up stumps, which they have also done and withdrawn from the Illawarra. And now the Hunter region is under question. So we can start to see there is a cascade here. Worldwide, there is a turning away from these greenwashing green renewables because they are neither clean, green, or good for our environment whatsoever. In that link, going back to the Bass Strait offshore, this connects back to the Marinus Link. So the Marinus Link is this huge underwater cabling system that's a high voltage. It's for data transference as well as energy. It's going to increase the electricity by 3 times. Now, let's look at Tasmania, the size of Tasmania here. They are already running off hydro, which is the most sustainable that is applicable to that state. So they have been running off hydropower for a very, very long time. Why on earth would be looking at increasing the footprint ecologically to install such a massive link? Well, it's all got to do with data centers. So why do we need all these mega data centers? Well, I guess that would be part of this digital ID and social credit system, and all of that was part of the rollout that seems to be starting to fall to pieces, but we need to keep pushing this over because what it's going to do is have a massive impact on not only the environment, but the communities. Because the thing is, with such high voltage cables underwater, like the Marinus Link would be, one, it would cause navigational problems to marine vessels above, allegedly. Heard that from a number of experts from all the research that I've done. Then we've got a number of other aspects where they're going to be putting in new grid lines to bring this high voltage cable on and offshore. And in that, it would be going through forest area, farmland, where again, do you think these farmers are going to have any impact on pushing back against these mega conglomerate corporations from overseas? And it seems to be this federal government is hell-bent on just pushing these projects through, again, without true consultation and regard for the locals and what's best for each state and this entire nation. The insanity continues. Then we've got the liquefying green hydrogen projects that are falling to pieces left, right, and centre. And a lot of them exist and call themselves green hydrogen because they use offshore wind and onshore wind as part of the factors of running the electricity for these projects. Of course, that doesn't make the product green, clean, or good for the environment. It's deadly toxic. So the latest project to fall over is the Central Queensland Hydro. It was scrapped. The project had already received, I love this, they'd already received $20 million from ARENA, and they'd already received $15 million from the Queensland government. So $35 million already went towards this project that's now completely scrapped. Could you imagine what we would have done with $35 million in Australia to help people who are homeless, can't put a roof above their head, and can barely feed their families and children? Again, for what? The Liberal government rejected this in Queensland because the project had put forward a funding request. I love this. Funding request of $1.6 billion. Here in Western Australia, in Kalbarri, they've already been giving project status or been pre-selected for a $2 billion grant to go forward with the green project or the green hub up in Kalbarri. Murchison Green Hydrogen, CIP, Copenhagen Infrastructure Partners, who were part of that blade failure. Oops, my apologies. Part of the blade failure off the Nantucket coastline. So we can see there's some history here of these major companies from overseas that just come in and superimpose themselves in communities, that come in and cause devastation and destruction with zero accountability. They've already got a track record with this, right? Because they've left that blade on the bottom of the ocean leaching out forever chemicals. So we know that if there is anything untoward that happens, what do you think the level of accountability is going to be? I think it's pretty close to zero. Now moving along to a smaller project, but this is highlighting locally what's going on. I got a phone call this morning from a concerned citizen, let's just say, or a concerned community member of Edge Radio Australia, that the big multi-corporations are literally destroying all the small businesses even more so. It seems that people are starting to wake up and see just how ugly the big corporations and the oligarch system is having an impact on small business. So apparently there is a large corporation that we all know that sells lots of fruit and vegetables that is going to be taking over the entire building and getting rid of all the smaller businesses that have been there for a very long time. This is in a Perth suburb. And this just highlights how much that we have come away from community, being able to be self-sustainable, manufacturing, that we need to look after ourselves and not allow these conglomerates to come in and destroy our businesses and our communities. Because if they can make a decision where they are cancelling everyone's leases and kicking them out of buildings because they are going to just expand their own conglomerate, which profits will go overseas, then we're starting to see now that the final last stragglers of business that held on and were able to survive the insanity of the last 4 or 5 years, and then all the rest of the pressure over the last 20, 30 years with having these mega corporations come in and destroy local businesses. It's time for us to get together and realize that we need to be buying our fruit and vegetables locally from really well sourced individuals and people that have integrity and that they care about what they're doing, because what we're putting in our bodies nourishes our souls. This interview with Bronwyn Holm, which is about earth food, really brought to the forefront how little nourishment we're putting into our bodies, which is exactly what they wanted. That this week it was stated that foods don't need to be labeled genetically modified if they don't have some other species that have been put into that genetically modified food. Or I would come back to say that we know now that the genetic modification that's been going on is attributing and contributing massively to the intolerances of foods. It causes upset in the digestive system, and a lot of people cannot tolerate it. It's seen as a bit of a toxin in the body. This is historically known. Please go and do your reading on this. It's time for Aussies all across this beautiful land, as well as here in Western Australia, to start to come back together and realize we really need to take back our nation. That it's time to come together and realize that we need to be making our own fresh food markets that we know are sustainable because they're from locals, that the money is going back into our own community, that we can move ahead as strong, self organized communities. We're seeing massive changes and we need to keep pushing back. And all I can say is that in the last week or two, we're seeing massive changes in these patterns. Certainly, there's a lot of contribution what's going on in the US and other nations, in Europe as well, the UK. The investigations that are going on into the damage and devastation of these so-called green renewables is all starting to come to light. Keep questioning, keep challenging the narrative, turn off your mainstream media unless you want to watch it to see the lies and the manipulation that are going on. Sometimes it's good to know what the enemy wants to put inside our heads so we can put the truth out there. Thank you for tuning in today to this very microbite, Martini's Eco and Country Bites. Get out there, get speaking your truth in the communities, stay strong, and I will see you again on Martini's Eco Bites. Thank you.